when I was I'll get straight into it. I was a convert, and you know, I think like reading your book, I came into Islam. I didn't really know anything about anything really. I mean, you just get pulled apart to all sides like a tennis ball in a bouncing across a net between like all the different movements and sects and groups within Islam. But
yeah, our brother Rafael, he was a Shia.
Oh, mashallah, like that book. I mean, yeah, but the book just, man, like it's just one of the most important pieces of writing in the English language about Islam today. So to have you on and
what book are you talking about?
Misquoting Muhammad.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it.
Liked it is a very understated way of describing it. It was definitive for me in many ways.
I don't know what to say. That's a very nice thing to say, and it's really nice to hear.
I think
there's things I would like to change about the book, but inshallah I can do a second edition. So what are your guys' names?
So I'm Tanzim, and Rafael.
I'm Rafael.
Speaking.
Yeah. I'm
Tanzim and
Rafael. Just think of the tennis player.
Oh yeah,
Rafael Nadal. Yeah.
So you guys are in what city?
Sydney, Australia.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, one day inshallah I'll be able to visit. I hope someday.
Inshallah. Whereabouts are you, by the way?
My friend, he's in one of the MSAs here, and he was telling me he was trying to arrange you, but it didn't work out and stuff. I don't know if you.
Was it Rashwani?
I don't remember the name, but our brother Irfan, he was, I think, part of the organizing members. So, inshallah, in the future, though.
Whereabouts? Really do you live in the US at the moment? Is it?
I live
Washington.
The Washington D.C. area. I live in Northern Virginia.
So you're in Washington.
It's like I live 20 minutes from my work, which is Georgetown University, and I live in an area. I actually live near the CIA, which is kind of interesting, although it doesn't really mean much. But
if they want to listen to you, I mean, it's probably a bit easier for them.
Yeah,
they don't have to go that. They don't have to stretch that far. But if you, how are things there at the moment? Is it a bit tense with the virus situation, or?
Oh, definitely. People are going crazy. It's very stressful. It's a mixture of things that people kind of not really sure what to do. I think some people kind of treat it like a vacation. Some people are really worried about their incomes and their livelihood. And of course, over it all is our great idiot in chief who's exhibiting his inability to manage anything appropriately and
absolutely.
And also, surprisingly, not. I can't believe that when he talks, it's still about himself and about. I mean, the guy's just so narcissistic. I can't even imagine being that narcissistic. I can't even imagine what it's like.
Yeah, it's funny. I met some Californians. They came here and they're like, "Yeah, we're really sorry about him. We're sorry that happened to the world, and we're sorry for its impacts." And I was like, "No, look, every time someone complains about that, I'm like, you haven't seen what we have here. It's really not much of a gulf in class between our leadership and the excuse that you have for leadership."
Well, I was always interested in. I don't know that much about Australia, but I kind of would follow stuff, especially the last maybe 5 or 7 years.
There's not much happening here anyway, so nothing to really research on.
Race and Muslims and stuff. I would kind of follow what was going on, and I was so surprised by how kind of open people were with their bigotries there, and how and it was almost like kind of a very open Islamophobia in a way, which and I thought, that's kind of the difference. In the U.S., people wouldn't really be that open, and then. I think when Trump got elected, we in a way, I think the U.S. kind of became, I thought, this is actually kind of becoming like what I noticed about Australia. It's sort of people who are sort of unapologetic about their racism and unapologetic.
Yeah,
and seeped into our politics a lot.
It's reflected in our policies about immigration and stuff as well. Like everyone, like Nigel Farage in the UK with UKIP was actually modelling his immigration policies on Australian immigration policies, where like anyone who comes here, we just literally turn them around now if they come here via a boat or whatever. any kind of refugee.
And asylum is really bad.
Oh yeah, we lock them in a prison for 7 years.
SubhanAllah, like it's pretty that kind of situation. It's normalized as well, which is really weird. Like we don't bring it up to our attention as much as we should in the kind of normal media.
But it has a lot to do.
It's seen as refugees, seen
my
as nuisance.
opinion is that it genuinely has a lot to do with our status as a former penal colony, and just like the fact that this nation was forged. A lot of the early settlers to Australia, and the conquest of the outback from the indigenous tribes, like a lot of that forged the kind of spirit of the nation. And so I think that never really went away. And as an island as well, that never helps. Yeah. You get that mentality of. So you had these convicts and farmers, lower class people from the UK and Ireland to come over here, carve out the land, steal what they could from the indigenous, and then try and stop anyone else from getting here.
It's so weird because, like, in the media here, it's like, they see refugees as nuisance and boat people, but that's literally how the Europeans came here. Like the exact same. If you actually see the videos of the olden days, bro, it's literally like the exact same way how like the Europeans came.
We know
to Australia.
that, but I mean, it's more just the fact that they won, so they get to set the confines and the parameters of everything, and that's what they're doing.
Movie, I forget the name. It was maybe 2007 movie. It had Guy Pearce in it. It was by this, I think, a musician. It was called. It was a crazy movie. It had Guy Pearce. It was really violent. And it was about this...
Death-defying acts?
Yeah, is that it? And it's like this brother, and he's trying to hunt down his other brother, and his brother's this convict. And do you remember that?
No, I don't think I've heard a bit about it, but I don't think...
It's insane. And actually, a lot of it... I'll look it up for you guys. A lot of it is about this notion of... pacifying the land, and this guy, just look up Guy Pearce. There's one, I think it's the guy who's in Ray Winston. Is that the actor's name? Mm-hmm. So he's in it, and he plays this kind of this colonial officer, this British colonial officer who's like trying to pacify and kind of tame this land. And where is this? Hang on. Filmography. Oh, that's not the right Guy Pearce. Anyway, I'll try and find it. But he's oh boy, it's a super violent movie, but it's really interesting. It's about just like kind of this one guy is out as an outlaw. I think sort of personifies this sort of wildness of that world and kind of its contrast to this thin veneer of British civilization. But it's not that the outback is, or the indigenous people are wild. It's that the settlers are wild. They're basically crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but I remember studying in year 11. We read a book called Why Weren't We Told? Before that, you're really kept in the dark in the Australian education system about what happened here. And yeah, we studied this book, Why Weren't We Told, about the genocide that occurred. And it just completely, like, I'm sure it's the same thing in America. Like, I remember we used to joke in first year history about this American textbook that we found, about how the Native Americans invited the Europeans onto the land and made treaties with them across the country and used to trade with them. And that was pretty much, that was the end of that section on how America was, how America came to be forged in terms of what it is today, and its relationship with the indigenous people there. And in many ways, you can draw parallels between American society and Australian society, I think, in the way we deal with it and stuff as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that part of it is, it's not, you can't really live in comfort or in psychological comfort if you sort of think about, and certainly you can't live sort of in polite comfort if you recognize that you kind of took people's land and displaced them and either actively or passively, led to their mass dying out, right? So I think in order to live, you have to just throw it on the carpet or come up with some myth about it, and then when someone comes and tries to bring it to your attention that no one wants to hear it, and they want to call those people crazy, or they want to call them gadflies or something. But if people don't come to terms with those things, they don't. They're just ignoring reality, and eventually they'll pay the price. I think in their cognitive dissonance, and the society will carry with it the guilt of the crimes that were committed, and people never really get over that, and it lives on as violence in the society. It lives on as a fear from people. I think there's a reason why Americans have all these guns and constantly terrified of crime and things like that, or white South Africans or something. There's these things create a disease, of violence in people in society, and
you have the tradition of slavery as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't really think about. I'm very much raised in this way of thinking, just from the society, and especially being from my background. I think I only really started to kind of understand what happened in terms of what it means to expropriate land and labor when I learned about the Palestinian issue. And so I actually changed my view about the history of the United States, not by learning about the history of the United States, but by thinking about the Palestinian issue, and how if I had certain views on the Palestinian issue, I really had to change my views on American history. Mm-hmm. So that just, I think, goes to show how thorough a job our society has done of kind of brainwashing people into this. And it's it's hard sometimes to break free of it without some kind of external route. By the way, the movie's called The Proposition.
The Proposition?
Directed by John Hillcoat. And Nick Cave is the screenwriter. And play stars Ray Winston, Guy Pearce, Emily Watson, and some other people.
My mom's probably seen it. She's really into these kinds of films. I think not violent films per se, but
it's super violent. It's like kind of crazy violent.
Australian history and stuff. I think what you were saying before, I was kind of raised. My parents kind of grew up during the late 60s and early 70s, where when the Great Social Revolution across the Anglophone countries sort of took place, and you had the hippie movement and so forth, and so they were very very left wing. What in America you would describe as liberal, which in Australia it's ironic because the Conservative Party in Australia is called the Liberal Party. I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I always remember Labor. I always labor.
It's they always grapple with that. But yeah, my family come from that. So I was actually raised from when I was born all the way through to now. I've just had, these realities taught to me in the most kind of austere and truthful way, like a very kind of candid retelling of what happened here. And I actually confronted the kind of dominant and sort of prevailing ideas about Australian history when I went to school, and when I encountered it amongst my peers and some of my friends and their families. I was shocked, completely shocked to see what.
Do you guys like Amr Rahman?
Yeah, of course.
He's such a funny guy.
Oh yeah, we're big fans. I think especially because he's Melbourne based. Anyone in Australia that had a sort of attachment to Deen and were Muslim, and also not even just amongst Muslims, but amongst the lefty kind of crowd as well. He's a big figure amongst them.
He's like a legend, yeah, and he kind of disappears as well. So he's really mysterious.
Yeah.
So we're that kind of adds to the aura.
If you're in touch with him, Dr. Jonathan Brown, I've been talking to him quite a bit, but he hasn't been coming on. I know he's probably busy and all that, but give him a kind word or two about us.
Have you interacted with him a lot?
Yeah, I met him in Istanbul, and I actually drove an hour to meet him, which for me, and when I'm in Istanbul, I don't leave the house. I just stay inside the house I live in, and I don't leave because I can't stand traffic. So but for him, I drove. It was an hour both ways. And
it's very hard in Istanbul. From what I hear.
I was really happy. I'm a huge fan. I thought he was really. First of all, I think his comedy is hysterical, and I play actually for my students sometimes. And then I also learned a lot about. I learned something about Australia, which I didn't know. I learned it. I went one night. I just sort of binge watched all the clips I could find of his, and there was this thing about the like Cronulla riots, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I had no idea
that's
what
a
these
big
were,
thing.
but I watched all these. It was so. And he talked about how there was some people with like a sign saying like "No hummus," you know, and he was just, and he was so happy. He was so happy that he's so happy whenever he meets, you know, Australians who are smoking pot because they're not drinking. And he's like, you know, that's the best. He's like, I don't mind Australians smoking pot. And then it was another thing I learned about this, this show called like the Hey It's Saturday show or something. Yeah. And they had this like blackface skit or something. And anyway, it was really interesting to learn like all this stuff that I had no idea.
No, it's interesting. I think at the end of the day, for me, like we have universal healthcare here and no guns. So I think it's like
it's safer for
wasn't there some massacre in like the late 1990s or something?
Yeah, there was a really bad one. But I mean, and that was our Conservative Party.
And John Howard was in power. Yeah, he was
staunch Conservative, and he just said, you know what, no more guns, and we accepted it. I think the no matter how many massacres America has, it won't, you know, precipitate any
it's
kind
stunning.
of meaningful
it's really
change.
Stunning, you know, and you know, it's pretty depressing.
You know,
can you imagine what it's like?
I don't know what the situation is in America, but like, you know, in the Sunnah, it's like Rasul Sallallahu and companions would be carrying around a sword. So I don't know if they use that dalil to justify having guns in America. Would you say that's
the Muslim American gun lobby?
Yeah. I think that it's honestly, I mean, my insight is no better than yours, I guess. But for me, it's like people watch too many movies. They have this idea of, you know, the cowboy and kind of self-sufficiency and something. But no, who wants to live like that? I mean, imagine living in a world where, you know, people are always shooting each other. They're just like random people just coming up and shooting people. And that's horrible. Nobody wants to live like that. I mean, I'd rather live with no gun and, you know, no one wanting to shoot me and just kind of go about my business.
Absolutely.
And then there's another, I know another very nice Muslim Australian guy, Mohammed Zaoud. Do you know that Mohammed Zaoud?
Name rings a bell.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy. I met him in Doha. He works there. He's got a lot of good outings there.
Does he run a podcast as well? I can't remember.
He does, I think. He actually runs a couple of podcasts.
Toledo, I think.
Yeah,
Society.
Exactly. Toledo.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know of him. Yeah, I'm familiar with him.
I went to Toledo recently in Spain.
Nice.
It was I just got back from Andalusia. That was an incredible experience as well. I met like a lot of the converts there.
Really?
The conversos. Yeah.
Converts to Islam. That's very interesting.
Yeah, there's a huge population of them in Granada. They have their own masjid there. It's pretty much a masjid run by converts. But it's interesting the dynamic too between their community and the Moroccan migrant community. But Spain. I'm sure you know you've been there.
Last time I went to Spain, I wasn't Muslim.
Oh, really?
I drank a lot of sherry. I drank a lot of sherry. That was the last summer before I became Muslim.
Have you been to Italy?
Yes, I've been to Italy. Been all over.
Do you like Italy? Like,
I went to Italy a couple of times. I think the most recent time was about 10 years ago. And I went to Rome with my friend Asad. We had a good time. And then before that, my family and I went to Italy, and I think I was 12 years old. And we drove through the entire country. And through Sicily.
Did you go to the south?
And it was, we took a ferry from Genoa to Sicily, to Palermo, and then we drove all around Sicily, and we crossed the Boot, and we went all the way up the Boot of Italy, all the way to Venice, and then beyond to Milan. And it was the most beautiful place I've ever seen. And even though I was young, I still remember how beautiful it was.
Because my family are from Calabria, which is just across from Sicily, literally across the strait. That's where my family migrated to Australia from.
Mm-hmm.
So I was raised by not entirely, but by and large, my grandmother, who was from a tiny village just in the hinterland above the Strait of Messina. And
you ever watched the movie The Leopard with Burt Lancaster?
No, I haven't. I need to get a list off you. I think
Brown's like a
movie.
Yeah,
that's it. These are. It's based on a book by an Italian author, and it's weird because the movie is in Italian, but Burt Lancaster is an American actor, so they have him kind of like dubbed over in Italian. It's called The Leopard, 1963.
Yeah,
I'll send you guys.
Look this up.
I'm going to send you guys.
I'm going to get a list of you. I think you've got some.
No, I'm putting them. Look, there's a little chat window, and I'm giving you guys the links there.
4.4, 4 out of 4. Roger Ebert never gives 4 out of 4. That's
it's a classic.
Must be a quality film.
He says he's explaining he's some minor nobility in Sicily, and he says it's kind of on the eve of Italian unification, great change in the land, and he says you don't understand my people of Sicily. They want to sleep. Says they want to sleep. Which I thought
that's incredible.
Beautiful.
Because my grandmother's grandparents actually remember the time of unification. She used to tell me the stories that her grandparents used to tell her about the time of unification. And Garibaldi was actually shot near her village, and that was where he was wounded.
But there was your family wasn't involved.
No.
They're just bystanders.
Yeah, no, they came here because they were actually my grandfather and his family were actually against the fascist, like the Mussolini, and they actually burnt the Italian flag at one point during Mussolini's reign. They threw it into a fireplace and ended up getting thrown in jail. And that's how they ended up. That's how they ended up over here on the other side of the world. I think they had to get away.
Seems like it was a good move at this point.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, there's universal healthcare here. So they landed on the right island.
I'd love to come visit one day. I'd love to bring my family.
Yeah, you'd have a great time as long as there's no virus and you stay away from the sharks and the like we have.
Yeah, I'm not a big ocean guy. I don't like going in the water. I mean, I'll go I'll do at the beach. I'll do like bodyboarding or boogie boarding or something. But I don't mess with the ocean. The ocean is like I don't like things where I can't see what's going on around me. And
that's so funny.
I thought academics are more reserved. It seems like you're doing everything out there.
I feel like the
like writing the book, for example. Wouldn't you have to be like more reclusive kind of character? That's what I kind of pictured. Like
there's a stereotype.
I don't know if it's a stereotype. It is probably a stereotype to be honest.
Well, I did. I mean, I spent many years of my life. I didn't do much. From when I was maybe 22 years old until I got married when I was 32. I mean, I didn't really do anything except study and research and write.
That gives me hope. I mean, I'm already married, so I would have to balance both.
That's it for you then.
Yeah.
Just my wife is very supportive of my my work, and she, I have to say I think I push it sometimes, and when she knows I'm like kind of obsessed with something, when I'm writing a book or something, she's very good. She doesn't. She could make my life a lot harder, and she doesn't. And she's, always supports me and lets me do my thing. And I think
she would be rather busy herself. Does she still work with? She works with Al Jazeera, or not anymore?
Actually, she's busier now than she's ever been. And poor thing, is super stressed out. She's the head of this show, the whole show now that she used to work for, and now she's the head of the show, called Fault Lines. It's a documentary show. Oh wow!
And I think I've seen it.
Yeah, and so she's, I would be beside myself with stress if I were her. But she handles it pretty well, and she's a great mom and a very supportive wife, alhamdulillah, and she's always making the kids doctor's appointments and making sure they have pants that fit them and things like that. And I mean, honestly, if she went there, I don't know, like these kids would just, like, I feed them and stuff, but it's never planned really well. So
no, I think that's yeah. I think it's the same for most guys I know. Like most of the men I know, the wives are both their personal secretary, and also in charge of the most of the major kind of practicalities and decisions that get made on a day-to-day basis. And and a lot of them, like even in myself to some extent, like I just sort of float around university. Do a bit of work and then come home and everything's kind of organized for me around that. I don't actually do much.
I pull my weight. Like I cook probably most of the meals. I do most of the dishes.
It's a team effort.
I do all the laundry. I fold all the laundry. I clean a lot of stuff. You know, all major like household tasks I take care of and stuff. But my wife is the one who like mentally organizes stuff. Like,
keeps
we
together.
need to do this thing. Because she works a lot. So I mean, I can cook dinner because she's still at work, so I can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, power couple. That's what it seems like. Because mashallah, both of you is doing great stuff.
My wife is just far more intelligent than I am, so I guess that's just what it comes down to. Like I just don't have the capacity to arrange my affairs properly.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good to have someone who's more intelligent than you. I don't know why guys want to marry someone who's less intelligent than them. I would hate that. I'd be like, what good am I getting out of this? I make mistakes and no one's catching them, or no one's giving me good advice.
I think you actually had a great piece of writing recently about the famous Sunna Trump's toxic masculinity piece. I really respected that a great deal, by the way, and Allah reward you for the effort you put into that. But yeah, what was the kind of process behind that? Does it relate to your own experience or something?
I mean, I think I think there's two things that came out of. One was, kind of seeing the way that a lot of young Muslims, I don't really, not so much in person, but it's sort of seeing them online, the way they're acting. And it's also kind of matched with the sort of alt-righty direction of a lot of life in the U.S., where guys are sort of, regressing in a way. I mean, I don't, and I said this very clearly in the article. I don't support some kind of liberal, progressive vision of gender relations. I believe Muslims should follow the Quran and the Sunnah, and I actually believe that would be good for everybody. It's not, I think everybody should follow the Quran and the Sunnah. But the choices that were being laid out in kind of American public life, I just found to be a false choice for Muslims, and that a lot of what I was seeing, and I think other people were seeing in terms of misguidance amongst men around us, is the result of people not really having a basis for knowing what it is to be a man, not really having like a metaphysical grounding for what it means to be a man. I mean, if you're just kind of interested in fairness, then, I remember watching these like men's rights documentaries. It was really interesting. And I was like, my first thought, and the thought that occurred to me throughout,
I saw one of them as well.
Is just I said, this is what happens if you don't have a metaphysical grounding for masculinity, right? If you're just sort of saying like they're, if you're saying like, wait, I thought things are supposed to be equal. So if they're equal, then why is this the situation? Like, why? I'm confused. Like, am I supposed to hold the door or not? Am I supposed to pay for the meal or not? Right? And for me, the answer is like, no, you as a Muslim, I don't care what's equal. Like my job as a man is to provide take care of my wife, take care of my family, make sure that they, receive the opportunities they need, make sure that my kids are guided to Islam, make sure that I help my wife, make sure I protect her honor, make sure I, give her a good and comfortable life. That's my job, and that's, if I have to spend every cent of my money to do that, I'll do that. And if I'm upset some of the time and feel like, no one said being a man is, being happy or, getting what you want. Your job is to serve your family. As the Aisha described the Prophet, kana fi mihnati ahlihi. He was at the service of his family. And, so I think part of it was seeing kind of a lot of young Muslim men going into this kind of regressive, I call like third world alpha male attitude, where, me talk to boys, you bring drink, Like, what is it? You can't get your own drink? Like, what are you, a baby? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that you don't cook for yourself. Like, you need someone to get you stuff. And then I guess, just like seeing the way that there's sort of false choice being presented, either this sort of like progressive,
that's what I was
neutered male, or this like regressive alpha male, and that's not the Sunnah of the Prophet. The Sunnah of the Prophet.
Don't you feel it's very reactionary? The kind of alt-right male men's rights attitude spreading amongst the Muslim youth in particular is something that is reactionary to the kind of what they perceive as a progressive trend.
Or even like just feminism is batil, I've got to fight this, and
I understand. I mean, it is. I think it is reactionary, but I don't think it's. First of all, I think it's reactionary. I think that it's an understandable reaction. That doesn't mean I condone it, right? But I think it's, if someone comes, a lot of the stuff you hear said by kind of progressive voices is just insane. I mean, you're just like, I mean, first of all, it's, okay, روح الحمام أنا هجي لك إن شاء الله. That was a really good announcer. I don't know if you heard that, but basically, like I understand, like, I can understand somebody listening to like leading Democrats in American politics, or just being like, these people are crazy. Like, they're completely crazy. Like, what are they? Who wants to have a society structured like this? I understand that, but the answer isn't to sort of swing in the other direction. I know the answer is you have to find. You have to find a middle ground, and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ gives us a middle ground. I mean, it gives us a metaphysically grounded middle ground. Yeah, I mean, it was, and I really feel like this is a chance for Muslims to offer something to the general society, because people have the society around us has no answer for this problem, and Muslims have an answer, and so I think people respect. Honestly, I know this one guy. He's a lawyer in the UK, and he deals with a lot of really controversial cases and stuff. And this one very famous lawyer who's not Muslim, like she was very old. She worked with him, and she became Muslim based on how she saw him treating his wife. Like, he's a good guy, but he's not like not like a wali or something, he's like a normal dude, and she was so surprised by how he treated his wife. She was really so impressed by it that really influenced her a lot, and she actually ended up becoming Muslim and going on Hajj and everything. And like that, I think Muslims spend so much time crapping on themselves and criticizing themselves that they don't see how Muslim etiquette, even bad online Muslim etiquette, is actually better than a lot of other people in the world. I mean, you rarely see Muslims say stuff like that's really just gross, or making fun of someone's mom, or making fun of someone's parents.
That's actually true. There's a boundary of
they're pretty
bad manners in online.
And that's actually something to be proud of.
SubhanAllah, that's very true. I wanted to touch on because there's that element as well, but what about the element of people will be like, some Muslim men aren't going out there and being courageous and taking initiative to maybe shy or reserve. Like, are you familiar with the science of the 4 temperaments, by the way?
Like Galenic medicine, or what are you talking about? Like,
so I don't know if it's, I think you're mentioning like the early version of it. I think for now it's like defined as phlegmatic character, sanguine.
Yeah,
choleric.
That's Galenic medicine. Yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah, because here locally we had like Muhammad Ishaq come down and did workshops, and we've had him on the podcast. So like, for example, phlegmatic types, they struggle to be perhaps courageous at times, or fiery when they need to be in a marriage situation, or take ownership and be courageous. So it's like when they don't exercise that, the wife might be like, what are you doing? Like, take ownership. You get what I mean?
You're talking about like in Islam, what you could Islamify all of this to talk about. Even Ghazali mentions the importance of Bahira and about how anger was, part of a male, like part of the male being
exercising
because it's important but controlled, in terms of protection.
When you need to do it, you need to do it. You know what I mean? But
that would be the main objection to kind of.
And I think that's where the alpha male sort of personas come along. Is they take advantage. They see that they're not being a man in that sense. So it's like, no, you have to be the fiery kind of type. But then it goes to an extreme as well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what. I mean, it's not just Muslim guys. I worry that. I mean, there's one kind of the stereotype of like the kind of Desi mama's boy stereotype where they kind of expect their mom to get them a wife and everything, and that they deserve everything, and the little princes. I think that. I mean, I don't know how often that really appears in its sort of stereotypical form.
I'm not complaining about that persona.
Yeah. But I think that's one problem. It kind of maybe hinders people's ambition or self-sufficiency. But and then I think part of it is maybe I don't know. If I were younger, I think I would legitimately be a little bit afraid right now of approaching women, even, as a Muslim. I mean, because, of making the first move, so to speak, of kind of going up to somebody.
Yeah.
I'd be a little bit worried about that, but I don't know to what extent this has really impacted, if it's a real fear people have, or it's just something that, I think about.
No, I think like certain personality types, it's just natural. Like I would have that kind of, I think a lot of people that are phlegmatic, melancholic.
Are you speaking in reference to like how it could be perceived in terms of an unwanted advance more?
Era. I'm not talking about it in general.
Okay. Fair enough.
And like, it's like, I'm a shy person. I know what you mean. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, look, by and large, I think, it's an exception to the rule when a man is characterized incorrectly as predatory. I think in my experience, when a man is described by women, even in Muslim spheres, as a predatory male, then they generally are a predatory male. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's a rare phenomenon when I think something is slanderous, so to speak. But that's not to be said that it doesn't happen at all. It certainly does happen.
Yeah,
but whether
I think it's not. I have a friend who's he's the Title IX investigator at a university, and he's a very good guy. I mean, he's not at all kind of biased towards being sort of PC or something. I mean, when he says things, I think it really comes from somebody who's, I think, really doing as impartial observation as one can hope for. And he says that, like the vast majority of cases are, like they are as the person who complains, it happened as they say it happened, I mean, that there's, that the statistics about 6 to 8% of false reports are, that's inaccurate. That is accurate, right? But I think the problem is that it's not about, is it a false report? It's about what do we consider to be unacceptable or assault or harassment. So, in one case, he told me about this guy one student had gone to another student and just asked for advice from the guy, and the guy had sort of hit on her in a kind of awkward way, but not in a sort of offensive way. And she filed a complaint, and I don't think the case has been resolved yet, but there's a open case, right? So this is on this guy's transcript in the meantime, and it's I believe. I mean, let's say it happened exactly as the female student said it happened. I still don't think it's an accurate report, but what it's reporting is not actually in and of itself, I think, necessarily a problem. I mean, if somebody makes an awkward statement about like, oh, hey, you're really pretty or something, and we should go out sometime, and then somebody says that is harassment, I don't think that's accurate. I mean, I don't think that's harassment. I don't think that happens a lot, but it certainly happens enough of the time that it's at least coming across this guy's desk. And that's an accurate report. It is an accurate report, but what it's reporting, I think, is not necessarily something that a lot of people would find to be punishable or worthy of punishment, worthy of sanction.
Yeah. I think wouldn't you say though, like because the whole sort of discussion is that there are. So this is really interesting. I think it plays. I think you've probably seen it for yourself, the dynamics of it on social media, where if there's a conversation of assault or abuse or even manipulation or even just like males in positions of power in the workplace kind of misusing that kind of their positions of power essentially. So you get from the more traditional camp where it's like, okay, this is kind of playing to the Me Too era where they're like, just don't accuse and falsely, which is true. Like, I'm not denying you shouldn't accuse, but then there's this sort of, maybe, I don't know what to define it as, maybe the activist crowd, it's like, look, why would the female come out and say, I've been, treated in XYZ way by this guy, because her reputation is on the line. So it makes no sense for her to come out. So we have to take her concern seriously and be aware of that. But then at the same time, it's like the religious, maybe traditional camp will be like, no, but we don't want to accuse the guy because, what if he's wrong and the Sharia stipulates XYZ. So it's better to err on the side of the caution. So that kind of like divide as well, which is like...
We were speaking to Dr. Shadi last week, and he actually brought up the case of Imam Zaid Shakir being embroiled in a kind of controversy surrounding his statement of the traditional position, and also just the value that we have in our society of innocent until proven guilty. And I remember he was cancelled for that. So yeah, this is that's an issue as well. Just like,
I wrote an article about this. I don't know if you guys wrote it, if you guys read it. Let me see if I can find it online for you guys. Not that you're going to read it while you're podcasting, but I mean, I think it's originally was on Emanwire, but this is I'm sending you this other link for it. But I mean, I think this is a really important topic, and I think the issue isn't. By the way, I don't think American society has found a solution for this yet, a way to balance these concerns and priorities. But I think this Islamic tradition gives us a pretty good answer, which is, you can certainly if someone is mistreated or they are assaulted or they are treated badly, like they should complain to relevant authorities. But that doesn't have to be a public. That doesn't have to be a public declaration. I mean, because
people will be like, they have to. But sorry, just to add in, it's because like people will be like, no, he's done it. He's not going to be accountable for the action, so we have to go public because he may have done it to.
Yeah, so that's a failure of Muslim institutions to hold people accountable, right? So I understand call out culture. I mean, in terms of why it happened. Like, if bad stuff is happening and no one's doing anything about it, then it's, like, the only thing we can do is we just have to get as big a megaphone as we can and yell as loud as we can to anyone who will listen and make as much noise and as much drama as possible until somebody does something about it. Like, that's completely understandable. I understand that's. By the way,
do you think shuyukh should be cancelled because if they did something like that and mistreated their positions of power?
No, I mean, I think that I would say that that's not the right question, right? So I would say, like, look, it's now been made clear that mosques and other Muslim institutions are not dealing with accusations properly, right? So they don't take them seriously. And when someone comes up and says, I want to complain to an employer or something, or to an organization, say this person is acting in this way to me. Like, I'm not accusing the person of zina. Like, this isn't a Hud trial. I'm complaining about their conduct. You don't need to have 4 witnesses for this. You just have to do an investigation and make a decision based on what you think is right. But people get caught up in this idea where, if you believe anything an accuser says, that automatically you're kind of, you're giving into fitna, or you're giving into, slander or something. But that's not true. You can do an investigation on the person. And if you feel that it's reliable that the person has behaved badly, you can talk to them or sanction them or fire them or whatever, right? But I think the problem is when this then, and if people weren't doing that, I think now this is people are now aware of this, and this is an issue, and they know that if they don't take care of these situations properly, that institutions are going to pay the price reputationally. But I think that I think that you also have to say that it doesn't, that doesn't mean that people's private activities have to be made public. So if somebody says, such and such a Muslim guy, tried to contact me and he was really creepy and I'm going to publicize that. Like, why? What did that guy's not, was he your boss? Was he your, if he's just a Muslim person who's contacting you, so what? So why are you outing that person's bad behavior? That's when you have to do satur. Did the person, hurt you? Did the person, attack you? Did the person, do something to you? If it's just, I didn't like the way he acted or something, then why publicize that? Because everybody, if I wooed my wife by writing her a letter and, offering her a free, coupon to, have dinner with me as a joke, and she didn't think that was funny and she didn't, like that. And she said, "Hey, look at this creepy guy. Look what he did." I mean, hey, I tried my best. Maybe I'm not good at, I'm not good at approaching women or trying to convince them to like me, but, I don't need to be humiliated for it.
What about if someone's bad behavior becomes, it's sort of mutawatir, in that there's multiple different narrations, concurrent narrations of similar behavior, from a person in power?
So let me tell you about one situation. And this is the reason. I'll tell you why I'm skeptical about some of this stuff, because I've received several complaints from, I've received 2 different complaints from 2 different women about 2 different scholars, right? And both of those women were like, the nature of the complaints were insane. And so one was, this scholar, Jinn raped me. Like, he had his jinns rape me, right? Like, what are you supposed to say about that? What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to be like, and in another one, so this person who is saying that about that scholar had also contacted a lot of other people. And I kind of figured out through very cautiously trying to bring this up with other people, being like, "Hey, have you ever heard, just very moving very slowly and seeing how they responded." And I and other people realized that this person had actually contacted a lot of people, right, about this scholar. Now, is it possible that this scholar had his jinn rape somebody? I guess it's possible, but I mean, I don't think that people would think, generally in society, that claim should be taken seriously. I think that and the rest of the message was, I mean, for me, there were a lot of signs that this person is not of sound mind. But the point is that, first of all, it definitely raised in my heart, I was like, whoa, this scholar is, suddenly there's a question mark in my brain, right, around this person. And now there's actually question marks in 1, 2, 3, let's say 3 other people who received these emails. And suddenly, let's say that person's name is brought up in a group of people, and me and these other people are there. Suddenly people are going to start, well, I'm not so sure. Maybe we shouldn't invite this person, or we don't know. So I think that, like with hadith, you can't, and this is funny that this actually involves hadith, but I mean, so if you say hadith is mutawatir because it has lots of different chains of transmission, and you say in mutawatir hadith, you don't actually have to look at the chain of transmission because there's so many, you can fall into a fallacy, which is, if there's a weak hadith and there's 30 different chains of transmission and each of them has been analyzed and are weak, and then I say, no, it's mutawatir. Look, there's 30 chains of transmission. You don't have to look at the isnad. So that's you've actually, there's a false conclusion there, right? Which is that this is a circular argument. You don't know that something is mutawatir unless you can actually know the nature of the change of transmission, because the change of transmission, like in this case, might actually all go back to one person who is themselves not reliable, right? So I agree with you in the sense that sometimes there's a lot of rumors around people and those rumors are true. But I think sometimes the rumors are false. And the issue is, to what extent are you going to try your best to protect people against false accusations? And the Islamic tradition has always taken seriously that if somebody wants to make a claim about somebody doing wrong or about being liable or about having caused injury, that the person making the claim has to present evidence. And in the absence of such evidence, the person who's being claimed against is considered innocent. They simply have to swear an oath that they're innocent. Yes, Hashim, إيش بدك? أنا مجهول الآن, okay? مش عارف والله. تحت. So that's I think the main problem is that I've, in my own experience, have seen situations where like question marks were created around people where that was not that process shouldn't have occurred. That result shouldn't have occurred.
Yeah. No, I completely
but I think
understand.
Like, look, there's lots of ways that people have already thought of dealing with this, and I'm not the one who came up with them at all. Like, for example, let's say you're on campus and there's a person who, one woman files a complaint about a guy, right? That basically complaints are held in escrow until, then let's say a year later, another woman files a complaint about that guy. So then that will actually, no one will know that multiple people are filing complaints, but there's like a central gathering house where this is being brought together, and they'll say, okay, now we have multiple complaints about this person. We're gonna really like take this investigation much more seriously. So I think that there's lots of ways to do this that can protect the reputation of people who are accused falsely, right? And even if it's 5% or 6%, those 5 or 6%, they deserve to have they also have rights, right? They deserve to have their rights protected. And there are mechanisms that can protect their rights and that can still give voice to victims and still take their plaintiffs' concerns seriously.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. I think that's a rather more common sense approach. I don't think anyone will take any serious objection to that. Those sort of stipulations. I do want to ask you, sort of based on it was almost a side point you made. But I do want to ask you actually, because it piqued my curiosity. When someone was, because this is sort of an area which I know you've done some research into, in sort of classical, I'm talking about in the medieval period, in the idea of the Sharia Courts. We have this idea of the Sharia Courts. Was there any like kind of serious quarter given to discussions about like jinn possession controlling an individual's actions, or was that factored into the court decisions often, or would it have been something that was rubbished or turned like that the fuqaha and the qadis would have turned their nose up and said, well, can't really tangibly verify that?
No, that's actually really, I want to actually write an article about this, because it's fascinating. And just generally about the kind of the miracles in the law. Mm-hmm. So the general rule is that if you, basically, kharq al-'ada la hujjata lahu, right? So something that breaks the normal rules of reality, the normal way the world works, doesn't have evidence, doesn't have evidentiary proof. So it's entirely possible, like, for example, that, I'm headed to class or my students head to class, and then God miraculously transports that student to Mecca, and the student prays there, and then miraculously transports the student back, but the student is 5 minutes late. Right? So that if you're, an Ash'ari or even just a general Sunni overall, I'm not sure about Shia Muslims, but, I actually don't have any grounds for disbelieving the claim because God could do that. Well, who am I to say that God couldn't do that? But it doesn't, they still get penalized for being late because violations of the normal rules of nature don't have any impact in law. So if I say, I was possessed by a jinn and that's why I did something, okay, I might be, one possibility is if I say I'm majnoon, like I was crazy, literally jinn.
Yeah. Jinn.
Then we know from the Prophet that the Prophet said Rafael al-qalam an thalath, right? So, what is it? What I mean, al-na'im hatta yastayqaz wal-saghir hatta yakbar I'm forgetting the third one, which is basically afflicted, the one who's afflicted until they recover, afflicted with mental illness. So I might not be accountable, like God might not punish me, or might not be criminally liable. So for example, if I murdered somebody, then maybe I wouldn't be executed. But I'm still liable for the damages I caused. So if you're a child or an adult who's crazy, if they crash into something and break someone's car, break someone's foot, they're still liable for the damage that are caused. It doesn't matter if they're crazy or not. They or their representatives are liable for the damage that's caused. So, in general, the general rule is that miracles don't have evidentiary weight, and I've found some really interesting instances of this in Islamic history. So sometimes you find cases where, someone does listen to, a miracle will affect a court decision, but it's pretty rare. Where you do see it, and this is, I think, where people get confused, is it, especially with adultery and stuff. A woman say I didn't do zina. I was impregnated by my jinn husband, right? So this, and then the judge is like, okay, well then you didn't commit zina. This isn't because they're breaking that rule about kharq al-ada not having any evidentiary weight. It's because in hudud cases specifically, the judge is looking for any possible ambiguity to drop the crime from the had level to the ta'zir level, to the discretionary punishment level. So if somebody comes and says, I don't know, I was miraculously transported, I don't know how I got into this bed with these 5 different, Swedish, underwear models. I was at home praying. And suddenly I was miraculously transported here and my clothes are gone. I don't know what happened. They'll be like, okay, well, that makes sense. And so then that just means you're not going to have the HUD, because the judges are looking for any possible reason to drop that crime from the HUD punishment. Now, I still might get another punishment, but I'm not going to have the HUD punishment.
Yeah.
So that's why there's people get confused when they see these stories about a woman who's pregnant for 5 years and the judge accepts that as evidence. That's not necessarily because the judge thinks women can really be pregnant for 5 years or that it happens very often. It's because any possibility of getting this person off the hook for zina, they're going to take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one of my teachers told me a story. I don't know if it's actually sound itself, but about during the time of Umar ibn Khattab, there was a woman who was to be punished for zina, and I think it was Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was who then asked the woman if she had asked the family and the woman if they ever had any issues sleepwalking. And when it was reported that she'd been known to move in her sleep, he said there's too much doubt. The had cannot be implemented because you never know whether she got up in her sleep and did. And obviously that was actually taken and accepted by the Caliph of the time, Umar ibn Khattab. And it's interesting that particular example and that was used by one of my teachers to describe how most of the crime and punishment in Islamic law traditionally was discretionary. He said, look, the hudud are incredibly rare, and a lot of the time, even for apostasy, like cases of apostasy, I know that there was a Sufi, a famous Sufi, who was of the Hurufi doctrine, Nasimi, Imaduddin Nasimi.
Sorry, we don't talk about Sufis.
And he was he was talking about how the political, because he was stirring up political trouble, the political establishment wanted him executed for apostasy. So they brought him before the Maliki fuqaha and said, look, he's saying all these heretical things. He's saying that, he's God and so forth as part of the Hurufi doctrine. And then the Malikiya were like, no, we find no grounds to...
Was this the time of Imam Junaid?
I think it was after the time of Imam Junaid. I think this was probably the 12th and 13th century in the Roman and like the Western dates. So
because there was a guy who did get executed for saying blasphemy. What's his name?
This is the thing. Al-Halaj.
Halaj.
But that's the same thing as well. So a lot of with Nasimi, I know the case better for Nasimi because I actually did a bit more research on it. The Maliki fuqaha refused to condemn him for being Nasimi for being a heretic. They said that, there's too much doubt. This is a language of the Sufis, etc., and they explained it that way. And so the Amir just executed him anyway.
By the way, the context for audience that don't get it, it's like he was saying blasphemous things that people say can be interpreted correctly.
That's
if
it.
you know enough.
But that's the whole point I was going to say is like this all comes down to the idea that, and this is something I know that you just touched upon in your story and kind of can be demonstrated historically. And I wonder whether, to what extent this is the case, whether you'd be able to weigh in a bit more. But yeah, pretty much a lot of it was discretionary, and a lot of it was also influenced by the political establishment of the time, in that they pretty much overrode.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, politics is certainly a big deal, especially on cases that are kind of political or have a kind of intersect with the state or state concerns. But I think also when you say discretionary, it's important to keep in mind that doesn't mean that it's sort of just a judge willy-nilly.
Arbitrary, yes.
Giving it. I mean, some madhabs and madhabs change a lot over time, but at various points they'll have like guides for, using the example of the guy who miraculously got transported into the bed with the team of Swedish underwear models, right? That if you're in a bed with somebody naked under the sheets, then it's, 90 lashes. If you're in a bed with someone naked over the sheets, it's 80 lashes. They would give, that's in the Shafi'i school. So if you, or in the case of the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman dynasty actually produced what's called yasaknames, which are these guide books of punishments. So they would actually, the dynasty, the Ottoman state itself would produce these books about, if you steal a chicken, that you get kind of paraded around with the chicken around your neck, like tied around your neck, and you get made fun of and stuff. Or if you get caught outside after Isha, because after Isha prayer in Istanbul, basically it was like you're supposed to go home. There's kind of a curfew. So if you're out like caught in the middle of the night, then you have to carry firewood for the rest of the night until the dawn as like kind of hard labor. So there's it is discretionary in the sense that it's called ta'zir, and it's not the had punishment, but it's not discretionary in the sense that it's there's usually some kind of order or routine behind how the punishment is arrived at. I mean, I just remember one case, like Imam Shafi'i, it's reported in the Miraculously Shafi'i of Bayhaqi, and also in Hilyatul Awliya of Abu Nu'aym. He says that Shafi'i says, "Man za'ama anhu yara al-jinn abtalna shahadatahu." Right? If someone claims they've seen a jinn, we will not accept that person as a witness, which is interesting, right? Because a jinn exists. No one can debate that jinn exists. The Prophet even encountered them, right? But, if someone goes around saying they saw a jinn, that this is, for Imam Shafi'i at least, this is like very suspicious claim. There's, one case I remember where this guy, it's not a case, it's a fatwa question. So I think it might be like a theoretical question, or it might have happened. I can't tell from the example, but this guy basically dies and then he comes back to life. So he dies, his wife remarries, his estate is distributed to his heirs, and then he comes back to life. I don't know if this really happened or if it's just a theoretical thing. And he basically comes to the judge. He's like, okay, where's my wife? Where's my stuff? And the judge is like, I'm sorry, your stuff is gone. Your wife is remarried. And he's like, yeah, but I'm not dead. I'm alive. And, the response is that miracles have no evidentiary value in law. And also another argument is that, okay, you're alive, but you died, right? It's like, yes. Okay. So once you died, this stuff is activated. Like, I know you came back to life. That's terrific. But the distribution of your estate and your marriage was ended the second you died. So it was like, they're kind of two different approaches. One is to say, miracles have no evidentiary value in law. And the other one is, okay, fine. It's a miracle, but you died, and that means that legally speaking, everything appropriate has happened.
Yeah, I think
that's actually pretty funny. I feel sorry for the guy. Imagine it's like, I came back, gonna go back to my wife and like remarried and can't
he was allowed out of the grave to going back to the dunya, and yet everything was taken away from him. Poor guy.
But where it comes up is like you see it in theoretical. Actually, it's kind of interesting because it reminds me of. God, this is the example I wanted to bring up in class, and I couldn't remember it. So when I flew from Japan, if you fly from Japan, this might be the case in Australia too. If you fly from like Japan to DC, you arrive later than when you arrived before you left. So you leave at 11 a.m., you get in at 10 a.m. the same day, right? So, what...
So you can pray your prayers on time.
Yeah, so what does that mean about your prayers, right? So there's this theoretical case that you see discussed in, medieval Islamic texts about it's called Tayyal Ard. It's like, teleportation, right? So if a guy is teleported from here to, Australia, let's say I pray, not Australia. Let's say I'm teleported an hour like to California, right? So if I pray Asr here, and then I get teleported to California, and then Asr happens there, do I have to pray Asr again, or did I already pray Asr? Right. So one argument is like, no, you already prayed Asr, and you fulfilled your obligation. And the other one is, no, the obligation of Asr occurs when the sun is at a certain point, and whenever the sun is at that point, it doesn't matter if you've done it before, you have to pray your prayer again. So they sometimes talk about these miracles as a way of like coming up with hypotheticals to talk about what really governs legal decisions in a certain case. And I was wondering if that would be useful for the person flying from, flying in a certain direction.
That's it's something that's really interesting as well if you go back the other way. So if you go from California to Australia, this comedian was talking about it actually. A Finnish comedian was talking about how he went from I think it was the West Coast to New Zealand, or maybe it was the East Coast to New Zealand, and how he actually lost a whole day. Mm-hmm. So he left on the 10th and arrived on the 12th. So he didn't live the 11th, and he was joking about that. He was talking about how like if what happens if someone called me on the 11th, like what would my phone say? Like, sorry, this guy doesn't exist today. Call back tomorrow. And it was like, he was saying about if the police ever questioned, he was like, where were you on the 11th of April? And he would have to say, I was nowhere. It's amazing though how, and there was also another example of that about how I think during the time of Abu Hanifa and his students, someone asked, what if a bird picked you up and flew you around the Kaaba 7 times? Like carried you around the Kaaba 7 times. Would that count as tawaf, right? And they had that discussion. And now there's helicopters with the Saudi royal family circulating the Kaaba. How yeah.
But I mean, what they were saying, I mean, you have to, people kind of sometimes make fun of those questions that they're asking back then. But the reason they're asking the question is they're trying to figure out what is really when you're doing tawaf, what is the thing that makes a tawaf valid? Is it you moving around the Kaaba? Okay. Is it you moving on the ground around the Kaaba? Where around the Kaaba? In the air, on the ground? Do you have to be moving by yourself, by your own motion? Can you be pushed? Okay. Can you be pushed above ground? So they're using this as a way to like feel out the edges of the legal principle that really should
what
govern
constitutes tawaf. Yeah.
Or like feel like where are the intersections? Where does one thing turn into another thing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was one case I remember, it's actually in Sahih Bukhari, where there's a chapter title, and it's a woman who, it's interesting. It's a woman who says, everyone says she's reliable, and she says, I had my period 3 times in 1 month. And I can't remember. Oh, I think it's because of like the idda, right? Or so it's like the idda. So she's like, look, I had my 3 period. I had thalathat quru. I had 3 menstrual cycles in 1 month. And one judge, this is very early. I think it's almost at the time of the 6 companions and successors. The famous judge of Kufa, Shurayh. He says, okay, like she says it, we're going to believe her. So this is actually kind of going against that idea that, and this is the early period, so you don't have like really kind of concrete formulation of legal rules yet. So he's kind of, okay, I'm going to believe her. But another successor, I think it was Atta bin Abi Rabah, who died 114 Hijri. He says, I'm trying to remember, I hope I don't get this wrong. He says it should be based on the ada. Like, what is the normal way in which this woman menstruates, or what is the normal way in which women menstruate in that community? And that's like what we're going to judge on. We're not going to judge on what she says, because what she says is incredible. It sort of breaks the normal rules of ada. Kharq al-ada. Literally, it's kharq al-ada. So that was an interesting case where 2 different judges take 2 different opinions, or have 2 different rulings.
I think it's not just important to delve into these things as you have for the perspective of helping Muslims kind of not only deal with the kind of practical concerns, and there are a lot of ulama, alhamdulillah, these days who are involved in that as well, but also the issue of polemics by detractors and racists against the Islamic tradition. One of them that I've encountered recently is that there is no kind of punishment or discussion about rape in Islam, and in Islamic law, this.
That's utter horseradish.
Yeah, that's what I've heard many times from kind of anti-Muslim thinkers and even like ex-Muslim speakers. They often bring that up.
But that's nonsense. I mean, if you see in the article I sent you, I linked it to you. Mm-hmm. First of all, the Prophet ﷺ talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
The companions talk about it. Every madhab talks about it. And I think the thing people don't understand is and actually sometimes Muslims make this mistake too, like some weird, Afghan village or something will make this mistake. No offense to Afghanistan, but sometimes you hear about this, like, oh, the Taliban don't do this. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't really know what their argument is, but there's a difference between the thing where you need 4 witnesses isn't, if someone gets raped, they don't need 4 witnesses.
No.
What you need 4 witnesses is if you are a third party accusing other people of doing zina.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the thing where you need 4 witnesses, I am accusing, Ahmed and Sada of zina. Now I need 4 witnesses. If I say I got raped, that I don't need 4 witnesses. That's because I'm saying I was assaulted. This is a jinaya. This is like a criminal offense, an assault on me, and an injury to my body. I don't need 4 witnesses.
Yep.
Depending on the school of law, I either need 2 witnesses, or I need 1 witness and circumstantial evidence, or I need just enormous amounts of circumstantial evidence. But I'm not guilty of slandering this person, of doing qadhf, because I'm not the person making a claim about other parties. I'm making a claim about something that happened to me. Mm-hmm. And so people don't understand that when you talk about witness in an Islamic court, witness is not the person making the claim. Witnesses are people who are brought in as third parties to testify about something.
Mm-hmm.
People say, non-Muslims can't be witnesses in a Muslim court against Muslims. But even if we take that as the case, which is self-debated, but if that doesn't mean that a Christian or a Jew or a Zoroastrian can't come into court and be like, this Muslim did something to me, because they're not the witness. They're the plaintiff.
It's really different. Wait, is he dropped out?
No, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. We can hear you now.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just
sorry.
waiting for you guys to talk.
I thought you were still
praying to God. I'm not
going. Yeah. No, that's it. I thought that because look, oftentimes when we're doing these podcasts, especially remotely, you can't actually read someone's body language to know whether they're just taking a pause in terms of their.
Sometimes it drops out.
It's like
so we thought it dropped out.
Or it's just
I
like a paragraph.
Go between talking nonstop and then just being quiet, which is
intonation. Yeah. I'd like to. So when I do that, that's why I try to give a prompt. I'll be like, so. What are you, it's just easier because, it's really, you take it for granted when you're actually in the physical presence of someone because then you can actually tell when they're about to speak. People open their mouths and they stretch their body out. If you're Italian like me, you start to like wave your hands up and down, like you start to get the hands ready.
Why don't you do a video podcast?
Yeah, that's a potential thing in the works.
Let's do a small donate to boys.
In relation to what you said, I read recently that in the Maliki Madhab, that if say you accuse was the names Ahmad and Sarah for the bit of consistency continuity here, say you Jonathan accuse them of zina, right? And so Sarah in this hypothetical situation gets pregnant as well, and she's not married, and then what happens is she says, no, I was actually forced by him.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 4 witnesses, she gets pregnant, and then she accuses him of being forced. The way I understand it in the Maliki Madhab is that if there's any indication that she was, i.e. If there's one witness, it actually specifically says that it is said that one witness is adequate because it is a report, and a report is sufficient to bring about a doubt which cancels the had. The second is when she calls out in help during the event. The third is when she comes in a state indicates her truthfulness, even if she did not cry out. Indicates the truthfulness is like any kind of physical evidence or any kind of correlation with, her story correlates with what is likely to happen, i.e., there's certain marks or certain indications that she was, dragged against her will. Otherwise, apparently the had is implemented. No, sorry. The had is unlikely to be implemented because of the nature of it, there being enough doubt in so much as her vehement claims.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was coming across that and then having to deal with the kinds of
because I think there's 2 issues here, right? So one, and I think people get confused because they get confused between the judges. So the judge's refusal to believe that something happened,
mm-hmm.
and in the case of the Hud versus the assault, right? So in the case of the Hud issue, the judge is going to try and come up with whatever excuse he can that something didn't happen. And they're gonna say no women witnesses, no witnesses who have any problem with their integrity, they're going to have this, like, for example, in a lot of madhabs, you cannot have, let's say the Hanafi madhab, which is the most accepting of witnesses, like the widest, kind of most flexible in terms of who it accepts as a witness. They will not accept women in Hud crime witness testimony. But that's not because they hate women or something. It's because you're trying to constrict as smallest group as possible who can testify, because you don't want to have HUD crime proven. So then the other issue is the proving that somebody did something, that a guy did something, and then holding that guy liable and punishing him either criminally or having him pay damages, right? So those are 2 different topics. In general, I would say Islamic law tends to be, it's very hard to prove that it's very hard to convict a rapist, right? Convict an alleged rapist. But that's because of the same problem that, let's say, the American legal system have, which is, it's really, how do you convict somebody if you don't know, like, was anyone there? Did anyone see what happened? No. Okay, so you say this happened. He says this didn't happen. You say, you've got scars on you, or you're hurt, or you're injured. He says, he doesn't know how that happened, right? Blah, 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 blah. Now with things like DNA and paternity tests and rape kits and things like that, you could it's probably easier to convict someone of rape, right? But the guy's still not going to get the HUD punishment because something like DNA, he can say, it's a miracle. My semen miraculously went into her body. I don't know how it happened.
It was IVF didn't,
Yeah, so so he's not going to get HUD punishment unless he confesses. But it would be enough as circumstantial evidence of what's called qara'in to convict him of the crime of assault, of jinaya or ikhtisab, right? That he's going to have to pay damages, that he caused physical damage to her. He's going to potentially pay like other kind of damages as part of ta'zir punishment. So, but the sort of, when you go back and you read a case from the 1700s or the 1600s or something like that, and you're like, well, why wasn't this guy convicted? It's the same reason that, even today, it's really, really, really hard to convict someone of rape in the United States, because it's very difficult to muster the kind of evidence that will convince a jury. And in addition, not a lot of women want to go through that. And a lot of women want to spend months in a trial and repeating over and over again what happened to them. So, there are certain features of the crime itself that make it difficult to prove.
It's also, I was reading from one of the Maliki books that I found online, a collection of fatwa based on a commentary on Ibn Ashir's, one of Ibn Ashir's books. And it was about how if the four witnesses against a woman, their story doesn't it doesn't correlate entirely, in so much as like there's a detail that's like certain details are omitted from one, or that there's some inconsistencies, or that one doesn't completely tell the story, then they're actually the accusers are actually punished for slander as well. So
that doesn't surprise me. I don't know that detail, but it doesn't surprise me, because again, when it comes to things like zina, you're trying to make it essentially impossible to convict somebody. And one of the ways to do that is to make it very difficult for someone to raise the cost of potentially testifying that this happened. And I mean, there's this one discussion in the Shafi school about like, that the person has to say, specifically use certain words to describe what they saw, right? Mm-hmm. Is it enough for them to say, I saw them having sex? Or do you have to say specifically, I saw the eyeliner applier going into the eyeliner case, right? So, why would they discuss this? Because there's people who, if you want to make it, you want to create as many hurdles as possible for this, to prevent the zina being proven. But people get confused, there's a confusion among people where they think that means Muslims don't care about rape. That's not true. This is about adultery and accusations by third parties about adultery. This is not accusation of a person saying they were raped. That's a totally different situation. That's a situation of jinaya or assault. If the guy confesses and said, yeah, I did it, then he's going to be punished for zina as well, because he's confessed to zina. But if he doesn't confess, he can still be proven guilty and be punished and have to pay compensation, all sorts of things like that, without ever being convicted of zina, because what he's been convicted of is a physical assault on the woman's body.
Mm-hmm. I think another sort of natural consequence of these discussions is the relevance of had today in the modern world, and the implementation of the hudud by the modern nation state, examples of which we sort of see in countries like Pakistan. We had a blasphemy case there that was very notable. In Saudi Arabia, to my knowledge, there are many hudud punishments carried out. So how do you assess those in light of
I don't think there's that many hudud punishments carried out, and I think
maybe not that many. Yeah,
I think most of the punishments that are like execution and stuff in Saudi Arabia are essentially political crimes, or murder, or murder, which is it is technically sort of a HUD crime, but it's not really a HUD crime. Like, so most times people get executed in Saudi Arabia, it's murder or political crimes.
Mm-hmm. But in Pakistan, there's the Hudud ordinances.
Yeah. So I think what you have to, and I was actually talking to my class about this the other day, that, you know, in some ways, when you look at the countries that have Hudud in their books, you know, Iran, Pakistan, Sudan, I'm not sure about now, but used to, you know, or the Taliban or Boko Haram, right? These are all countries that are they're on like a fault line between Islam and the West, tradition and modernity, imperial global consumer capitalism and local identity, right? So it's almost as if it's like the front lines of the culture wars in a sense. And just like you get these guys, you know, in the US who are, you know, we need to go back to the time when 1950s when daddy knew best and everybody was good and moral and God fearing and stuff like that. Like there never was that time, right? That was never a time, right? So when you're faced with this sense of change or trauma or imposition, or you're trying to take back control, like, so Islamism, you know, Islamist revolutions like the Iranian Revolution or the other movements like Boko Haram and things like that, they're really about saying no. They're saying no to the West, right? No to global consumer capitalism, no to global Western values, right? And when people do that, there's this tendency to kind of lapse back into this sort of almost caricature of your original identity that you're trying to reclaim that actually is so sort of exaggerated that it never really existed. So, I mean, if you look at Istanbul from during the Ottoman period, for 500 years of Ottoman rule in Istanbul, there's one instance of someone being stoned for adultery. Yeah. And, you know, then you go to let's say a Taliban. I have no idea how much they have, but I mean, if, you know, let's just imagine that. I'm just making up a number. Let's imagine 10 women have been stoned in the last 20 years in Afghanistan. I'm just making that number up completely. But, I mean, are you really telling me that the Ottomans didn't know how to do Islamic law, or that no one was committing adultery in Istanbul and somehow the Taliban do? Or, you know, no, it's because they didn't feel implementing HUD punishments didn't fulfill the sense of trying to reaffirm your lost identity or reaffirm your control over your destiny against this foreign interloper. So I think that's one of the reasons why you see the places where HUD crimes appear today are there places where there's this sort of epochal expression of identity, or a place that is engaged in serious traumatic change.
I think with the point about identity, that's a really good point. Like even another example that I realize, you know, in this day and age, some people will be like, you know, feminism's corrupting society. Look, you know, women are standing on their own feet, and, you know, look, they're not cooking for us anymore, whatever. And it was interesting because I came across this video, and it was like very grainy footage, like 1930s or something. And it was some guy just randomly interviewing people passing down the street. I think it was more like white Australia back then. But even in that case, he was just asking I think the question was, so how often do you help your wife? He's like, and then I expected I think everyone kind of expects in this day and age a sort of, you know, she should be taking care of, you know, all the household chores, and I'm just going to bring the money in. But then it was literally the opposite. It was interesting because she was like, look, you know, when she does a bit of work and things, you know, she's a bit tired, I'll, you know, take the care of, I don't know, the cooking and the cleaning and all that. And it was really fascinating because in this day and age, it kind of ties in with the whole identity. You'd think back then it was all very rigid and, I don't know, quote unquote, patriarchal. Maybe it could be argued the case that it wasn't. So so that was it kind of ties into identity. And also with another example would be I think the Hizb. Sort of when they propagate khilafah at times, or they're
we're going there.
Actually, maybe not every HT member, but I'd say initially, if you have a conversation, it's all about reclaiming the khilafah in the past. But then you start realizing bit by bit over history how
the glorified idea of
the glorified Khalif, man. Like it was a disaster.
Well, it wasn't a disaster, but I mean, like the idea was that there were khulafa who were like many of them were fasiqeen.
You just see Khilafah more solved, or I think, kind of like
what
rhetoric.
You see is a lot of these, and this isn't just true for Muslims. This is true for many communities. Is that these expressions and these debates are really kind of foils for projecting our anxieties, our fears about not being in control of our lives, about not being, the real people that we want to be, am I really a Muslim? Do I really believe? Do I really know what is happening in the world? Do I really feel any sense of safety and security, almost like existentially? So I think that the sort of the past becomes a theater for expression of these anxieties. And, I understand, like, if somebody says, I want to have, look, I don't want to, I'm not going to play some sort of pacifist or sort of a quietist part and say that, Muslims should never talk about politics because, the Khilafah was never something real. Like, no, you know what? Muslims understood for a long time that, you can talk all you want and other people can talk all you want, but unless you have a state, unless you have some military and political power, no one's going to listen to you and and you're not going to be safe. And that's a bloody good point. And,
absolutely.
But sometimes, people tell stories and make myths to help in the facilitation of that idea. I mean, in the case you think of Italian unification, the kind of nationalism and myth of Italy that was spun by people like Garibaldi or Victor.
Right? So, even though there was no Italy, an idea even to this day that there's like,
so I mean, but
the Italian language.
But myths, when they get enough guns behind them, they become realities. And like Modi's India, right? So, I think that, it's a tough balancing act. I'm a historian or I'm a scholar, I try to understand the past and understand human society and how things change and how religious or legal tradition functions. I try to understand this in a way that helps answer my questions about my identity and about what I should believe and what I should think. And I hope that my answers help other people. But, I guess I'm very aware that, I don't know how to say this. Not a lot of successful political movements or social movements are based on some scholar who wrote a book about, I don't know, maybe this.
It was, I think you touched on like at the beginning, like I think it was roughly at the beginning of your book, misquoting Muhammad Sallallahu. I think you're making that comparison between who speaks for Islam, and you kind of used Egypt as a case study, where you're like, you have the Islamists, and they were quoting, Hadith and Quran, and then when the military came in power, even the Al-Azhar alim, it was like kind of quoting like Islamic rhetoric to justify his positions of why it was the right move, and to even like I guess the lay that was quoting general like hadith. So it's like, and I think you pose the question like, who really speaks for Islam in that sense? So what's your sort of take on that? Like, because we have these kind of factions and groups, and they all claim to sort of speak in behalf of Islam. So how do we kind of discern that sort of these sort of situations?
What's important to keep in mind is, as important and as all-consuming a debate as it can be about, like, who should be for example, who should be the American president? Should it be Donald Trump, or should it be Bernie Sanders, or should it be Joe Biden? Right? It's very easy to say that, the way you answer this question shows the totality of your moral commitments and your moral positioning, right? and that somehow our religion should give us a clear answer. But the fact of the matter is that things like politics are actually, it's only a small little sphere of life, right? And it's a sphere of life that actually is not, for which we don't actually find clear answers in the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. Right? So, we should want a just ruler. We should want a just society. But, I mean, if the ruler isn't just, does that mean we rebel? No. Okay, we don't rebel. Okay, well, what do we do? Do we protest? Okay, well, you can protest. How do you, but the point is that, I don't think that there's some clear Islamic answer, that in the Sharia or fiqh that is going to tell us that, Sisi should be in charge or Morsi should be in charge or this, that, and the other, right? I think that when you're talking about those issues, you're just talking about different proposals for what would represent the best interests for life in that polity. And that's an issue of nuance and an issue of comparison. It's not a black and white issue. And, so I think that there is no, one of the reasons I don't like the kind of neo-traditionalist political quietism is that it tries to shut down those discussions in the name of avoiding fitna or in the name of, not causing instability or chaos.
The fitna's already here, though, isn't
it?
But
I mean, that's the problem. So what you're saying is, everyone else in the world gets to have discussions about what they think would be best politics for their tax law or their defense spending or their family law or whatever. Like, they get to have discussions about how tax money gets spent, right? Or who's going to be the best ruler or how do we make decisions. But Muslims don't get to have those discussions because it's going to cause chaos. That's ridiculous. Like, it's creating an insanely artificially low ceiling for what expectations Muslims have of their governments. And Muslims should be allowed to have these discussions. And, there might not be a clear, quote unquote, Islamic answer for what government is best or what policy is best. But, it doesn't mean you can't debate them based on other arguments of what's best in best interests or most productive or, advancing certain values that we all agree on. Guys, unfortunately, I gotta go because we've been talking for a while, which is nice. I've really enjoyed talking to you all, by the way, but I gotta go because I gotta go deal with dinner time.
Okay.
That is an incredibly important responsibility.
Any off chance that we can continue recording after dinner?
Probably not, considering that there's been a lot of calls to my phone while I've been on the phone with you, and
it's
at a certain point I'm gonna have to respond to those calls.
It's absolutely fine.
Thank you so much for your time. It's interesting. So we had like a whole list of questions that we touched on. We just went straight off. We had this natural kind of flow where we discussed some interesting, very interesting topics.
I'm happy to talk another day. You can, and apparently we're not going to have school for the rest of eternity. So, if you ever want to do another discussion, just send me an email. Look, I'm pretty easygoing. If you want to discuss something, I have no problem. It's fine. We'll talk.
Awesome. It was honestly a great pleasure.
My time or whenever. It's no big deal.
To get a bit of your time, and then I really enjoyed.
I want to ask one quick thing though, because I noticed you shared our Boys in the Cave episode with Yasser Morsi and Mort.
Oh, yes.
What's your thoughts on that episode? Because that was really interesting. Because I felt that Yasser Morsi doesn't get the time of day amongst maybe American traditionalist kind of Muslims. So it was really interesting where you shared it. So what did you make of that episode in general?
Was that the one about white supremacy?
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting. I don't know why would I not share? I mean, that's look, I think it's fascinating. I mean, I think I think it's it's something that I need to be aware of. I don't being a white guy, I think that look, I'll be honest, I don't like this I don't like the whole, white people are evil all the time stuff. I'm like, come on, people,
Yeah,
like there's this thing.
He doesn't say that. The type like Yasser is not like that's not his objective.
No. That's not. So I mean, he's an intellectual, right? That's real thought thinking. But there's this sort of thing of like, some people say like white Muslims can't be real Muslims, and you're like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard.
Or white Muslims are all
pretty
evil.
heavy.
They're all like white Muslims can't suffer Islamophobia. Like I've suffered Islamophobia. I mean, I 100% agree with you. I don't suffer anywhere near as bad as other people, but I mean, don't tell me that like nothing bad can happen to me because I'm white. So I think that there's kind of there's kind of like an extreme to it, but I think that there's also a lot of how white supremacy and whiteness and norms and work that I never understood, that I was never aware of, that I've learned a lot about from.
I actually recommend check out Yassir's book, Radical Skin, Moderate Mass. It's a very good read, but it is more geared towards our current climate, like in Australia, because he kind of deals with. I don't know if you're familiar with that book.
He's probably, I think.
No, I think this stuff is always useful. I mean, if anything, I think as we discussed earlier, I think the U.S. and Australia are, you can have similar conversations. But just the other day, I was like, we went into this Thai restaurant, which is this Thai food restaurant near our house. We were big fans of. We like the food a lot, but it's very small. And we went and I was like, we're never gonna get a table. So my wife and I were in the car. We had our kids in the back, and I ordered so I was like, okay, just go in and give our order, and then I'll come back. I'll drop you off at home. I'll come back and pick it up. My wife goes in. She comes out like a few minutes later. She's really upset. And I'm like, what happened? She's like, oh, they were so rude to me. They wouldn't talk to me. I tried to put an order in. They said it was going to take too long to even cook and I shouldn't even bother. I was like, wow, that's messed up. I went in. Hello, sir. How are you doing? My wife wears hijab, right? So, I mean, I went in and like, I swear to God, I've never been treated better in my life. I mean, like they put down everything they were doing. They're like, oh, no problem. Definitely you can order food. Oh, we'll call you when it's ready. I came out. I was just laughing. I said, that was ridiculous. That was ridiculous. I mean, you can't, look, so I think, if somebody had only experienced what I travel around the Muslim world, I get treated like royalty, and I don't deserve it. There's a lot of Muslims who are, quote unquote Muslim ethnicity or Black Americans, and they're much more knowledgeable than I am, and they're much more pious than I am, and they deserve much better treatment than I do. They deserve to be up on stage, not me. And I've always tried to point that out as best I could.
Might I ask you one quick question though?
Yeah.
We asked this question to our guests before the episode. If you had to pick like 3 people in history to have a chat with in a cave, but you can't pick Rasulullah Sallallahu or the Sahaba because everyone will pick them anyway.
And your family, for the sake of
people, they navigate out of that question.
3 people in history that I want.
But intellectuals, if you had to have a chat
at the same time or a different time.
Have a discussion with 3 particular intellectuals.
Yeah, like you can tell them, look, I want to have a conversation. I want to have a meeting with you.
One would be Al-Bukhari.
Wow. Yeah.
One would be interesting. That's an interesting question. Bukhari would be one of them for sure. And I think also, that's a really good question. Why
Some
can't
people
I think
answer
of
in 3 seconds. I've had guests in the past that made me pause for like 15 minutes and give a response.
I don't know.
It's Bukhari
would be one. I mean, 1 is fine, but you're asking 3. That's tough.
Imam Ahmad?
I mean, I think that fine, but I think I would probably get the same from Bukhari. I mean, I think I would. That would be achieved by talking to Bukhari. I think
Ibn Taymiyyah.
I'd really like to talk to.
Very interesting.
I think Alexander the Great. I'd like to talk to Alexander the Great.
Fair enough.
And I would like to talk to.
Bukhari was Persian as well, so I'll have a good chat.
Well,
you probably knew about Alexander the Great very well. I'm sure.
Sogdian. So he would be speaking, and I think I made this mistake in a book, one of my first book I wrote, but Bukhara at his time, they were speaking Sogdian, which was it's an Iranian language, but
it's gone
not. It is not. Yeah, it's not mutually intelligible with Persian. So his native language would have been like Sogdian. Muslim.
It's like
Muslim was a Persian speaker, but Bukhari was Sogdian speaker. So I said Alexander the Great, Bukhari, and I gotta say the Duke of Wellington.
Wow.
That was an unexpected one.
I just think it's like he fascinates me. He's just such like I don't know what it would be like to be that big a badass and still be like working.
Yeah, that's you.
And I mean, I don't even know. Like he campaigned in India. I'm not saying I approve everything Duke of Wellington did, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just saying, like, I find it really interesting to be, to do so much badassery, and then you're like, I'm going to go into politics, and then you're like sitting on the, like who's going to debate that guy? Who's going to be like, you know what, Duke of Wellington, you're full of it. You don't know what you're talking about. That would be. I think it would be interesting to talk to somebody who had experienced what he experienced.
He's finished Napoleon's career,
mate. I have a feeling he would say, really candidly, he'd say, to be honest, I have no idea how I did any of it. I just got lucky. I just got really lucky. But anyway, I guess we'll never know unless we get the time machine, the TARDIS.
That's it, the TARDIS. Anyway, thank you so much.
Okay, guys, listen. If you ever want to do this again, just call me. Send me a message. You have my contact info, and I'm happy to talk more. You can ask me more questions.
Just a quick idea, we want to talk about Hamza Yusuf, Sheikh bin Bay's politics, to how you navigate politically speaking in this day and age, to just the idea of colonization, the past and now, and how that's shaped the way we looked at tradition, or even the idea of, is our fiqh that we follow now backward, or sort of not backward, maybe outdated, and if we need a new path. There's so much. So you guys
just want to talk about just some small issues. What do you guys? Those are huge issues, man. Those are like 100 years of discussion. So send me a message. Send me a message. We'll make an appointment and we'll talk.
All right, sounds good.